Okay, today we're going to do chapters 20 and 21 of the Tanya. Now you remember when we finished off yesterday, we explained what we're going to be doing in the next few chapters, all the way through 25. And we explained like this. Yesterday we learned in chapter 18 and 19 the fact that every Jew has what the Alter Rebbe calls Ahava Mesuteret, the hidden love for Hashem. We explained this hidden love for Hashem comes from the fact that every single Jew has in them a part of Hashem. And because on the deepest level, that's who I am connected to Hashem, therefore I will do anything to make sure that I'm not disconnected from Hashem. And that's why a Jew, even one who doesn't know anything about Torah, doesn't know anything about mitzvot, is not majorly religious, not so fanatic, but when it comes to a test of, God forbid, idol worship or his life, he'll give up his life better rather than idol worship, because he knows and he feels that if he bows down chas v'shalom to this idol, he's going to be disconnected from Hashem, and that's something that a Jew cannot handle, because it goes to the depth of who he truly is. That's what we learned yesterday. And then when we ended, we said that from chapters 20 all the way to 25, the Alter Rebbe is going to help us take that feeling that we have, which says that I don't want to do anything that's going to make me disconnected from Hashem, and get that feeling to be in our minds and in our hearts so that it motivates us to do Torah and mitzvot and not to do sin. Right? That's what we said. And we explained that the way he's going to do that is by explaining to us what Avodah Zarah really is, and by understanding what Avodah Zarah is, we can understand in some way how every sin is a minor Avodah Zarah. And if we think of a sin that way, we would never do a sin.
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah?
What if someone offered, for example, you do Avodah?
What if what?
You do Avodah Zarah, but it's
Yeah.
not in the way that you're not, it's like...
Okay, so there's a whole bunch of laws about Avodah Zarah, when a person violates or doesn't violate.
I know, but for example, if you're gonna, if they offer you money, say you're gonna do it to tzedakah, or is it or if it's I don't know, if it's for good intentions.
It doesn't matter.
No,
Yeah, the act is the act, and a Jew would never do such a thing. Intentions and no intentions. Okay. Now, in order to do this, in order to explain what Avodah Zarah is, we first need to begin by understanding what is the real truth of Hashem. What's the truth of Hashem's oneness? Right? We learn that Hashem is one. We know that, right? And there's a mitzvah, besides for the mitzvah of emunat elokos or hamanas elokos, which is to believe in Hashem. We also have a mitzvah of yichud Hashem, achdus Hashem, the oneness of Hashem. What do we mean when we say oneness of Hashem? What do we mean? That Hashem is one. First of all, there's no two gods, of course not. And we also don't just mean there's no two gods. We also mean that Hashem himself is not made up of parts. Chas v'shalom. For example, you're one person, right? But when we say that you're one person, you are one person, yes, but you're comprised of a bunch of different parts that come together to make you into one person. You have hands, feet, a head, a heart, feelings, ideas, a body, a soul, and all those things come together to make a one person. Hashem is not chas v'shalom made up of a bunch of parts coming together to make one. He is just simply one. Following? Just one. Just one entity. Now here's the really big question. And before we get to this big question, I want to make the following statement to help you understand. What we're about to learn is very, very deep ideas, and they're very difficult to understand. Even for the greatest scholar who really understands it, doesn't really understand it. What do I mean? Because what we're going to be learning about when we talk about the oneness of Hashem, really we're talking about something that's spiritual. It's not physical. And whenever we talk about something that's spiritual, we never can really understand it. Do you know why we can never really understand it? Because we live in a physical world. And everything we imagine, everything we picture is physical. For example, when I tell you, or when you read in the Chumash, that Hashem took the Yidden out of Mitzrayim with a strong and mighty hand. You heard that expression? Yada chazaka. Right?
We see a hand. We see a hand.
Right, but do you think Hashem had a real, actual hand, physical hand? Obviously not. So you know that when the Pasuk says, when we say that Hashem took us out with a mighty hand, we know you're not talking about a physical hand. We know it's a spiritual hand. But if you close your eyes and try to imagine a mighty hand, what do you think of? A physical hand. Even though you know it's not really it. Why do you do that then? Why do you imagine a physical hand? Because your mind is trapped in your body. Your soul is trapped in your body. And therefore the only things you can think about, imagine, and fully understand are things related to the body, because that's how you experience life. You understand what I'm saying? So anything spiritual is very difficult to understand. And therefore, when we're going to learn now about the oneness of Hashem, even someone who really understands the ideas doesn't really understand the ideas, because what we're talking about is not physical, it's spiritual. So it's very difficult to understand. I'm telling this to you so that, first of all, when we're about to learn, I want you to try to concentrate and focus on what we're saying, because it's very difficult and subtle ideas, number one. Number two, I'm telling this to you so that you don't imagine it as physical, and even when you imagine it as physical, know that it isn't the real way of thinking about it, really it's spiritual. And number three is, don't feel so bad if it's hard to understand. It's okay, it is very difficult to understand, but when we move to the next chapters, you're going to see why it was important to learn what we're about to learn.
Because he said the real way to see stuff is spiritual, right?
Yes, but it's impossible to imagine spiritual.
I know, but like for tzitzit, how do you imagine?
Well, tzitzit and tefillin are physical, right? Hey, you want to close the door there, please? How are you? Morning. Yeah, so tzitzit and tefillin are physical things, but their spiritual importance is hard to imagine. Just like it's hard to imagine anything that's spiritual, right? Second. Okay. So let's get into this. What do we mean when we say the oneness of Hashem? Let's think about this. And here's really the big problem, or the big question. And that is like this. If Hashem is really, really one, just one thing, right? Then what that means really is that Hashem doesn't change, right? Something changes because there's lots of parts. And when you have lots of parts, you move one part into that part, and you switch the way this part connects to that part, and then you change it. For example, you take this table. It has 4 legs and a top. If I change it around, I cut the board in half, I flip it upward, and I move the side legs in. I've changed it from a table into a chair. Right? So the reason why there's change is because there's parts, and I move the parts around to make it change. But if Hashem is truly one and doesn't have a bunch of parts that can move around, so there cannot be any change. Right? Now, if there's no change, how do you have a world? When I make something, I changed. What did I change? Before, I didn't use that energy on making this wooden table or chair, and now that I made it, my energy is less. I took my energy from my arm, moved it, made a table. Hashem made a world, so is there a change? Before he made the world, it was just him, and now he made the world, there's him and the world. Is that a change? It would seem like it's a change, but chas v'shalom. So how did he not change even though he made a world? This is the big question.
What do you mean? Like, it's like you say, I made a table after you asked me if I changed.
You did change.
I did not change.
Yes, because you put energy. It's not like you stayed the same before, during, and after you made the chair. You changed. Before the chair, you were sitting on the couch. During making the chair, you were invested and putting energy and thought into making the chair. And now you're done, you're thinking about how you made the chair. Those are 3 different states of being. God doesn't have different states of being. He just always is the same. He doesn't change his thoughts or change the way he acts. He just exists, right? Whenever you're doing something, there's a change. There's a before, middle, and after, right? When you make something, there's you before you're making something. You're chilling on the couch. You're thinking about how you're going to make it. Then there is you actually making it, and you might have to change your ideas of how you're making it, because when you thought about it, there was a mistake, and now you're changing it, right? And then you're done making it. You look back at it and say, how did it go? How was it working? How would I do it differently next time? Right? Besides for the fact that you actually took physical energy that's in your arm and put it into making it. Right? So there is some change, even though, of course, you're still the same you, but you've gone through a change. You have a new experience now. The same thing when you learn something. You change. Before you didn't know that piece of information. Now you're busy trying to figure out the information, and then you know it. 3 states of being. Before, during, and after. Now Hashem doesn't have that, right? He doesn't change. But He made the world.
He's not a being.
Of course He's a being. He's not a being that you and I think about, because we think of something physical, right? Remember? We always try to imagine something physical, and Hashem is not physical, but He certainly is a being. He's not a being in the way we imagine it, but He is a being. So we need to understand how it is that Hashem makes the whole world and doesn't change. And when we understand that, then we're really going to understand what we mean when we say that Hashem is truly one. Ready? You understand the question? Okay, so let's get to try to understand the answer. It's very difficult again, but we're going to try to understand it. How does the Torah describe creation? How does the Torah describe creation? What power of Hashem does it use? We said before that Hashem takes the Jews out of Mitzrayim. He uses the expression, a mighty hand. What's the power of Hashem that describes creation?
The power.
Yeah, we mentioned this in chapter 2. What's the parable? What's the example? Vayomer Elokim. And God said, He spoke. So the way the Torah describes creation is Hashem's speech. So of course, again, it's not physical. Right? But the Torah is using the example of speech because it wants to teach you something.
So you can't change because it's speech.
So let's see. Let's imagine this now. Let's think about this for a second. When you speak, right? Does it change the amount of speech you can speak? No. Right. When I do something, a little bit of my energy is changed. When I make something, if I work out, I'm a little stronger. If I run too fast, I'm now tired. Right? So my energy that I invest in doing things changes when I do something. But when you speak, your power to speak does not change whatsoever. You have the ability to speak infinite words. You can talk all day long. The only reason why you have to stop is not because you can't speak anymore, but because your physical mouth is tired. But the fact that you have the ability to speak doesn't get tired because you spoke a bunch of words, right? You can speak and speak and speak and speak. Your physical mouth gets tired maybe, and your breath gets tired, but your ability to speak does not change one drop because you spoke a sentence. Right? So now let's do that. That's one layer of how little a few words means to you. Because a few words means nothing compared to your ability to speak. Level 1. Level 2. Think now of that sentence compared to the same words when you thought about them. The same way you can speak endless amount of words, you can also think endless amount of words. Right? Now, not only could you think endless amount of words, but the word that's in your mind, in your thought, is so much higher and so much greater and so much more spiritual than the words that come out of my mouth. Obviously. Right? What's the proof? In order for me to say a sentence or to say an idea, it takes me 10 words, 15 words, 20 words, 30 words, and each word has to be said after the next word. Right? So it takes time to put one word out, and then the next word, and then the next word. And then with all those words combined together, we have the idea. How long does it take you to think about that idea? 1 second. 1 second you think of the whole idea. Even take something as simple as 1 plus 1 equals 2. How many words was that? 1 plus 1 equals 2. It's 5 words. Now it takes, a half a second to say all those words. But then when you think of 1 plus 1 equals 2, you don't have to think of all those words. 1 plus 1 equals 2. Like that. 1 plus 1 equals 2 is in your mind in one go. Even though there is the words in your mind, 1 plus 1 equals 2, but the words in your thoughts are much They're so much more spiritual than the words that come out of your mouth, right? That they can all be done in like one moment.
You can read faster than
That's right, you read faster than you speak. If you're fluent in reading, right? That's the idea. So that's level 2. So first of all, the few words I say is nothing compared to all the ability I have to speak. Now, my speaking itself is nothing if you compare it to my thoughts. Now let's go another step further. Let's compare my thoughts to my feelings. It takes time to think about how you feel. But the feeling of it is one feeling. One feeling can last 10, 20, 30 minutes of words in your thoughts. And those words in your thoughts can come pages and pages and pages of stuff you would write in a book, or words you would speak. You see what we're doing here? We're comparing one word compared to my ability to speak, nothing. Now compare that to my ability to think, nothing. Compare that to the actual feeling from where that thought came, and then from where that speech goes, totally nothing. Let's use an example of the moment you feel hungry. The moment you feel hungry, you just feel it in 1 second. Then when that feeling goes to your thoughts, it takes some time to process. What's the feeling I'm feeling? It's hunger. And then you have to process it and think and say the words. Can you please pass me a slice of bread? I'm hungry. Right? Every time you go to
feelings, though. You can't feel hungry.
You do. There's like a, babies feel it even if they can't speak it. They feel, even if they can't even think of what they're feeling, but they feel hunger, right?
You can feel it. You're talking about feelings a different way.
Yeah, I'm speaking more of emotions, but just think of it. It's easy to imagine it when you're thinking of a feeling of hunger. It's just a sense. There's a sensation you have in your stomach or in your body, by our body, that you just feel hungry. And then like a split second later, you start to process that feeling in the words in your thought. And then you can speak it out. Right? So the feeling, compared to that one word that you say, I am hungry, the word I am hungry is like nothing compared to the actual feeling. Right? Because the one word, I am hungry, is nothing compared to my ability to speak, which is nothing compared to the ability to think about how I'm hungry, which is nothing compared to the actual feeling of being hungry. Let me get the Doherty brothers there. You follow what I said? Yeah? One more layer. Okay? One more layer now. Compare this feeling now to my actual self that has these feelings. Feeling of hungry is only one version of endless feelings I actually have. Right? It's only one version of feeling hungry. That adds another layer of how little that word means to me. The word, let's go through all 5 stages. The words I am hungry is nothing compared to my ability to speak. My ability to speak is nothing compared to my ability to think. My ability to think about me being hungry, in this case, is nothing compared to the actual feeling of hunger. And the actual feeling of hunger is absolutely nothing if you're going to compare it to me, myself, that has abilities to think all kinds of things. All to say that 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 words I say are nothing, mean nothing to the actual me. Following?
No, but I don't understand the fact that you said feelings, not really feelings.
Yeah, I'm just using it as an example, because it is a feeling, it's a sensation. Not like an emotion feeling, but it's a sensation. It's an experience you go through where you just feel hungry. It's true. If we use let's use your example, the feeling of being angry, let's say, right? So there's the words I say to express my anger. That's nothing compared to how much I can speak, right? Which is nothing compared to how much I can think about being angry. Which is nothing compared to the actual feeling of being angry. Which is nothing compared to my ability to actually have feelings, because I have all kinds of feelings. Right? So there's like these 5 levels of how little that one word means to actual me. And to get to that one word, I have to go through all that process, right? My feeling of being angry, and then thinking about it, and then speaking about it. Following? That times infinity is how little it means for Hashem to utter a few words and make this world. The world is created, Torah says, by Hashem's speech. That is one of the reasons why the Torah uses the language of speech. Why does the Torah use the example of speech? Why doesn't it use the example of making with his hands? Like used by Mitzrayim, it says God took the Jews out with a mighty hand. Why doesn't it use the same example of Hashem made the world? Or use his hand to make the world? Why speech? To express this idea. That the amount of energy required for Hashem to make the world is so little that it's as little as the amount of energy it takes for you to say a word compared to your actual self. Following?
Saying I'm angry is selfish?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah, we're not talking about the godly soul or animal soul. We're just using this as an example to explain, to show how little a few words means to your actual experience of yourself. That is how little that's how little energy Hashem puts into actually making in the world compared to him himself. That's the first way of understanding how Hashem does not change when he creates the world, because it takes tiny, insignificant, little amount of energy compared to his infinite self. Following?
Yes, so you're saying that, because it says hand, whatever, it's something about hands. And so
That's when Hashem took the Jews out of Mitzrayim.
so it's, for example, since saying is less effort than
Hand.
using your hand, so you're telling me that he
Took the Jews out. Good question. So what that means to you is that the level of Hashem, that Hashem invested in taking the Jews out of Mitzrayim, is a greater level than the level he invested in making the world. Because the level he invested in making the world is nothing, it's just a few words. And the level he invested to take the Jews out of Mitzrayim, mighty hand. There you go. So the mighty hand obviously is not a physical hand, but it's there to demonstrate to you that the energy of himself that Hashem decided to invest in taking the Jews out of Mitzrayim is a greater energy than creating the world. Exactly the point. But all of this tells us the first level of how we understand that Hashem does not change because he made the world. How he still remains one. Answer, because the energy put into this world is insignificant, infinitely nothing compared to him himself. I'll give you one more example for this. It's not a perfect example. He doesn't mention this. The example I just gave of a speech, this is what he says in chapter 20. I'm getting to give another example, which he did not mention in the actual book, but it'll give you a better idea to understand what I mean, that it's infinitely insignificant. Imagine you had a wallet, and the wallet had $50 in it. And every single time you took out $50, another $50 reappeared. Magical wallet. Just imagine, hypothetically. You have a wallet with a $50 bill. Every time you take out the $50 bill, another $50 bill appears.
Are you using the $50 bill? Are you going to use a $50 bill?
Yeah, you take it out and spend it, give it to your friend, doesn't matter. Right? Now, someone who stole from you $5,000, because the guy took, how many $50 bills do you have to take to 5,000? What?
100.
What? How many? 100. Yeah. So the guy took out 100 times. Right? Another guy took a $150 bill. Just took out once. Who made a bigger difference in taking money away from you?
The same.
Neither. It doesn't change anything. I have infinite amount of $50 bills. It's not a perfect example, but it gives you an idea for this idea that if you have infinite energy, then a couple of little things to do make no difference to you. So, what?
It's more the concept, or the concept.
Yeah, so it's not exactly a perfect example because the person can steal your wallet and now you have zero. And also, you can only take out one $50 bill at a time. You can't take out 5,000 at one shot. So it's not a perfect example, but it gives you the idea that when you have infinite of something, then nothing makes a difference. So if Hashem has infinite energy, then a few words, which is how we're describing creation, is nothing, changes nothing of himself. So if a few words change nothing of me, and I'm not infinite, it changes nothing of me because my ability to speak, the few words is nothing compared to my ability to speak, which is nothing compared to my ability to think, which is nothing compared to my feelings, which is nothing compared to me myself. So if a few words make nothing to me, and I'm not infinite, how much more so a few words of creation means nothing to Hashem, who has actually infinite energy. Following?
Why would he rest the seventh day if there's no energy at him?
Why did Hashem rest? Good question. It doesn't address this here, but not because he was tired. In fact, our sages tell us that when Hashem created the world, everything was there except for one thing wasn't created yet. Rest wasn't created. So it's not as if Hashem rested because he was tired. He rested because he wanted to put into the world something called rest.
So it was another creation also?
In a way. In a way, it's another creation. Hashem put into the world this new idea called rest, which is a higher level of Hashem. It's a higher level than the speech level. That's explained elsewhere in Chassidut. But that's the answer to the question. But it's a good one. So is this clear so far? This is chapter 20. The Alter Rebbe explains how we understand the oneness of Hashem. The oneness of Hashem, as we explained, is connected to Him not changing. Because if He changes, then that means He has parts that are moving around. Right? And Hashem doesn't have parts. He's one entity. This table has parts, so I can move the parts around and change into something else. I have parts. I have me, my brains, my feelings, and then I can go through different experiences and change. Change how I think, change how I feel. But I change because I have all different parts. Hashem doesn't have parts, so He doesn't change, chas v'shalom. So if He doesn't change, how come He creates a world? And how come the world doesn't change Him? Answer, because the amount of energy that Hashem puts into this world is infinitely insignificant and worth nothing compared to His infinite energy. And to express this idea is why the Torah uses the language of Hashem speaking to describe creation. Understood? Okay, I understand it's a hard idea, but I hope we got some sense of it. And remember, it's hard to imagine it because it's hard to imagine spiritual. And all the examples we're given are physical, right? Physical speech. But obviously, Hashem is not physical, doesn't have physical speech. So it's hard to imagine what it is spiritually, but at least we get a sense of it.
He also speaks. He also speaks, for example, in a certain language. Like,
Lashon HaKodesh. Yeah, but it's not as if like when Hashem speaks, there's a booming voice that comes out of heaven. Even though that's what the movies show you, that's not really what it is. Right? Because that's physical. It's much more like Hashem puts an insight into your mind, and that's Hashem speaking to you. Kind of. It's hard to explain it, but it's kind of what it's like. Yeah, so it's much more like that Hashem revealed to us or opened to us all these words. It's much more like that than actual physical booming voice. I'll give an example. He doesn't say this here, but for example, the Midrash says that the voice of Hashem, I'll tell you two things the Midrash tells us. Number one, it says that the voice of Hashem came from every direction. When Hashem gave the 10 Commandments, it came from every single direction, number one. Number two, it says that the voice had no echo. What does that mean? What does that tell you? Let's start with echo. What is an echo?
it repeats. Yeah.
But how does an echo work? I speak, the sound travels, hits the wall, bounces back, and makes an echo. Makes an echo, right? So, an echo actually comes from the fact that there's a barrier. It stops my voice from continuing. Now, when Hashem reveals Himself, is there any place which is a barrier that says, "Oh, Hashem's not here"? The echo comes from the fact that my voice does not go past the wall, so it bounces back, right? But when Hashem speaks, is there some place that is supposed to say, "Oh, Hashem's revelation doesn't come here"? Obviously not. So there's not going to be an echo. Which is the exact same thing of what we mean when we say that this sound comes from all directions. Because if Hashem is going to reveal Himself to you, it's going to be everywhere. Because Hashem is everywhere. So if we think of it that way, is it this loud, booming voice? Maybe, maybe not. That's not the main point. The main point here is that Hashem shows Himself to us, and then we experience and feel and know and get to see these 10 Commandments. Are we following?
Yes.
It's hard to understand, but it's kind of the idea. Okay. So that's chapter 20. It explains why creation doesn't change Hashem, because it's nothing. It's just a few words, which mean take no of His energy and doesn't change Him whatsoever. In the same way, times infinity, that few words I say change nothing of me. Okay? Now, in chapter 21, the Alter Rebbe Tanya adds another layer to this oneness of Hashem.
The five letters.
Let's see.
Steps?
What?
You just said there was 5 steps.
Oh, the 5 steps were words compared to my ability to speak.
Is he adding another one? Okay.
Oh, no. He's not adding another layer now. But he's going to tell us a whole other dimension, a whole other element of the oneness of Hashem. And this is like this. When I speak, it's true that the few words I say don't change me. But where does my speech go? It was inside of me, and now it goes outside of me, to you. When Hashem speaks, where does it go?
To us.
Outside of Him? Is there any space outside of him? No. So even Hashem's speech is still within him.
But it's not outside of us.
So the way we experience it, and that's something we're going to talk about tomorrow, but the way we experience it, it's as if Hashem is far away and he's talking to us. But it's not true from Hashem's perspective, because from Hashem's perspective, there's nothing outside of him. So even when he creates, it's not like he's putting words out there into the world. It's all within him.
But I'm talking about humans. It's air that comes out of...
Yeah, for humans, it's air that's inside of me that comes out through my mouth, bangs in my lips and stuff, and goes out there, right? It goes into the air. That's correct, but it's all outside of me. That's the point. But for Hashem, these words don't go out of me, go out of him, because there is no place out of him. It's all within him. It's hard to imagine this, because again, this is a spiritual idea. It's hard to imagine this, but think of it this way. When you imagine in your mind a house, and you can spend hours and hours imagining details upon details of the house. How many rooms, how many floors, what the color of the paint is, how many people live there, the furniture, the beds, the chairs, the tables, all of it. Right? You can imagine all of it. Where does it all exist? Where does it exist, this house? In your head, because you're imagining it, right? Yeah. No. Oh, okay. You're imagining how it exists in the city, but I mean, the head that you're the house you're imagining only really exists in your head. Now, what that means is, what is the house's existence?
What does that mean? What is the house's existence?
The house's existence is nothing other than the fact that right now you want to think about it. And what happens if you decide to stop thinking about it? Did you destroy the house?
No.
It just stopped being. Because the whole thing is inside of you to begin with. Right? That's what it's like for Hashem to create this world. The whole entire thing is all inside of him. It didn't go anywhere. He didn't speak outside of him. The speaking is inside of him. And therefore, the world being nothing and the world not changing him isn't simply because it takes a little bit of energy. That's true. But besides for the fact that it takes only a tiny little bit of energy, like speech, even all that energy is still inside of him.
It's an imagination. It's his imagination.
So why don't we call it Hashem's thought? Why do we call it Hashem's speech? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, so it's...
Okay, so the answer to that is because the world does exist.
What?
The world does exist. And it exists because Hashem wants it to exist, which we're going to talk a little bit more about tomorrow. It does exist because Hashem wants it to exist. And that's why we call it speech. Because if you called it Hashem's thought, you would think that it's just fake. We're calling it speech to say it's real. But you should know that Hashem's speech is not like our speech. Our speech goes outside of ourselves. Hashem's speech stays within him. So it's real, but it's real only within him.
So he is the galaxy. He is like the whole thing.
So you know what the words our sages uses? Hu mekayma shel olam. He is the space of the world. Ve'ein ha'olam mekaymai. But the world is not his space. Let me say it again. For me, what is my space? I need space to exist, right? So space is the world. The world is a bunch of space. And only after there is space can I now exist inside of it. Right? But for Hashem, it's the other way around. It's not like there's a world and then that's where he lives. All the way around. He is the space inside of which the world exists. Follow? So now, I hope what you're getting at is that Hashem is not just existing in the world. He's actually the existence inside of which the world exists. Follow?
So that means he did put some energy inside.
So, number one, it's a tiny amount of energy, because it's speech. But more importantly, it's true he put energy into it, but that energy never left him. So when I change, it's because the energy goes out of me, and that's when my energy is spent, right? So using an example of making something, right? And we said before that there's a change in me, right? Because there's me before, I'm chilling on the couch. Now I'm using all my energy to make something, or to run, or to play something. And then when I'm done, I'm tired, and I have to relax and recoup my energy, right? The reason why I have to do that is because the energy goes outside of me. And because I spent my energy, I have to relax, recuperate, and get back my energy. But because for Hashem, all of his speech is still inside of him, he never lost it to go get it back. It didn't change anything about him. It was always there. It's still in him. You know what it's like, says the Alter Rebbe in chapter 21? Remember we said before that my ability to speak is nothing compared, the few words I say is nothing compared to my ability to speak, which is nothing compared to my thought, which is nothing compared to my feeling, which is nothing compared to my actual self. Now imagine the word while it's still in yourself before it left you. What does it count for? Nothing. That's what the world is. The world is Hashem's speech while it's still inside of him, and therefore it means nothing. It's all nothing. It's all just him.
So if you take an example of rain.
Of rain, yeah.
Water, so that one is a little drop, and there's a big wave, and the big wave has to go to the drop to make it like a bigger thing. So I think
So using the example of taking a drop of water and putting it into the ocean, and the water is nothing because it's inside the ocean now. The little drop of water. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I know.
It's a good example, but you know what the problem with that example is? The one problem is the ocean is much, 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 much bigger than the drop, which is why it's insignificant. It's nothing.
You still have to move to the...
But the water, the drop, still made the ocean one drop bigger, right? Because the ocean isn't infinite. The ocean's not infinite. It has a beginning and an end, right? Every ocean has a beginning. It's massive, it's huge, but it has a beginning and an end. So it's not infinite. It doesn't go on forever. So one drop of water, yes, it's insignificant, but it's still one drop.
It's like adding air to air. Air is infinite, no?
That's interesting. Maybe adding air to air. That's an interesting idea. I have to think about that. It's an interesting idea. But the one the Alter Rebbe uses is putting the word you spoke, the two words you said, back into your ability to speak. Or back into you. It's infinite. It's nothing. It doesn't even exist there. Even though it comes from there. So because all of the words Hashem said to create the world, which itself is nothing because it's just a few words, never even left him. It's all still in him. And this is the truth of what we mean that Hashem is one. When we say Hashem is one, and here's the key, listen very carefully to this. We don't just mean that Hashem is one and there's no two Hashems, chas v'shalom. What we mean when we say Hashem is one, we mean that Hashem is the only thing that truly exists. Nothing else really does. Because everything else is only inside of him. And therefore nothing else really exists. You ever heard the pasuk, Ein oid milvadoi? Translate the words. There's nothing else besides for him. What does that mean? So one way to read it is, there's no other gods. Okay, another way of understanding it is, not there's no other gods. There isn't anything else. Nothing else is true. Nothing else is real. The only real thing is Hashem himself. Why am I real? Oh, because he wants me to be. Get it?
Yeah, so the spirituality did not exist before Hashem. So, like for example, before Hashem created the world, there was no spiritual.
There was just him.
There's no spiritual?
No, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Just him. And guess what? Right now, still just him. And in him, he decided to make a bunch of things.
For example, us now, we're not spiritual, but then before, was he considered spiritual?
It's a good question. We say God is spiritual because he's not physical, but it's not as if God's the same thing as an angel. An angel is a kind of created spiritual being. I'll give you an example. An idea. Where does an idea exist? Where does 1 plus 2 equals 2 exist? It's an idea, but it's a very specific idea. It's finite, right? It's not infinite, the idea of 1 plus 1 equals 2. It's not limited to our physical world, and therefore 1 plus 1 equals 2 can exist in Montreal, can exist in China, can exist in Australia all at the same time. And it does. It exists everywhere and anywhere all at the same time. So it's not stuck in physical like we are, but it's still not infinite because 1 plus 1 equals 2 is one specific idea, and there are billions of ideas. Right? So even spiritual things exist in a certain way, which is why Hashem is not really a spiritual thing either. He created spiritual. He created all these ideas and angels.
But when we think about Hashem, the first thing that comes in our mind is he's God, he's spiritual.
Right. That's what I'm saying. It's very hard to imagine Hashem himself. And that's why I said it's very hard to imagine and understand these things that we're talking about today. Because our brains don't work that way. Our brains work in our bodies. We only think about what we experience. The most spiritual thing we can think about is an idea or a feeling, which is a spiritual idea. It's not like physical. You can't put it into a jar, right? You can't put it on a scale. But we still can kind of experience them. But to start imagining Hashem himself, it is straight up impossible. But nonetheless, we're trying to understand a little bit of what we mean when we say Hashem is one. And what we mean is that there is only one truth. Everything else only exists because he wants it, and it's all within him, and therefore does not change him in one drop. He's still the same him as he was before creation, during creation, after the creation, same Hashem. He just decided within him he's going to make this thing called world, with only a tiny little amount of energy called speech, which never even left him. It's still inside of him. And therefore when we say Ein Lavadai, nothing else but him, we mean literally, there's nothing else except for Hashem. That's the only truth. Got it? It's very, very deep. It's very deep and it's very hard to understand, and we really need to spend a lot of time thinking about it to fully connect to this idea. But this is the beginning of understanding what we mean when we say Hashem is one. And then tomorrow, God willing, we're going to get to what we mean when we say idol worship. What does idol worship mean? And then we're going to understand. It's going to be, it's going to begin with 22. And then we're going to understand in 23 and 24 and 25 how mitzvahs really tell us the truth that Hashem is only one, and the sin, in a way, is kind of like idol worship. Because you know what a sin does? A sin says there's two. Hashem is here, yeah, but there's me also. Because I do what I want. So once you say that, I do what I want, hey, you're denying the truth. Hashem is the only one. See? And that's how we're starting to understand how every sin is kind of like an idol worship. And when we think of sin that way, we would never sin.
Yes.
Follow?
For before.
Getting it?
Yeah,
This is where we're going.
Infinite money, someone still gives you $50.
Sorry?
If you have infinite money, right?
Yeah.
And someone gives you $50.
Yeah.
You'll still be $50 richer, whether you have infinite or not.
You use my example.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's why the example is not a perfect one. It's not. It's not a perfect one for a lot of reasons, because you're only limited to taking $150 out at a time.
No,
But it still gives you the
it's up the wallet. You have infinite.
Oh, sorry. If I had infinite amount of money, yeah,
Exactly. So you own.
and someone gave me $50, it would make no difference to me.
Yeah, but you still say thank you. You still appreciate it. But
I might, because the other person was being nice, but it doesn't change my wealth because I have infinite.
it kind of does.
Not really.
It's, I don't know.
It can't. You can't have infinite plus 50. Infinite just is infinite. There's no plus anything. Right? Anything that's plus something else, it means you have the end of this number plus another number. You can't do like infinite plus infinite. It just there's no end. Right? It's very hard to imagine, but think about it. It's kind of wild to think about it. Okay? So that's for chapter 20 and 21. God willing, we'll do more on this tomorrow, understanding where idol worship fits into this and where Torah and mitzvot fit into this. Okay?